It is the Beaver Banter podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner. There's Ian Rivers. Ian, we're shaking up the order of our podcast this week. We put out a new episode, a big season preview for men's hockey. Tell us a little bit about it, Ian.
Yeah, we had Jared and Lucas on last night, Jared Roboto and Lucas Peipenhagen. We've talked to them individually before, but it was super fun to be able to get them both on at the same time. Have a lot of thoughts bouncing around. We went pretty long on that one.
Those guys could talk about hockey for like 3 hours, but we had to stop them at 1.
Yeah, we could have, but like CJ said, we're just poor little podcasters. We need money.
Please take pity on us.
Please take pity on us. Yeah. Anyways, it was a great episode. We kind of previewed the CCHA, the Beaver hockey season, individual players that we like coming up for this year. But yeah, that was a fun episode. Now we're going to talk in our usual light about some football, some volleyball happened over the weekend, some soccer, and even some women's hockey. So should be another fun episode.
Yeah, we got a lot to talk about. First off, it was homecoming week. Bemidji State does go swimming in Lake Bemidji, a tradition unlike any other. Alex Faber of the Bemidji Pioneer did a good article talking about the lake jumping and the history of it and all that, which is really cool. And I believe it was him in the Pioneer wrote that. But I mean, really cool piece just talking about the history of it and kind of, it's not as old as you'd think for kind of how long Bemidji State football has been around, but still long enough to be considered a tradition unlike any other, I say. They go swimming again. They play UMary. They take care of business. It really wasn't a contest from the beginning. Bemidji State made plays through the air. They made plays on the ground. And Ian, I think this is a good time to highlight our Beaver Banter Player of the Week on the men's side.
Yeah, we split it up this week because there was a couple of good candidates. So Drayton Lehman, wide receiver for Bemidji State, won this week's Beaver Banter Player of the Week award. Like we just said on the men's side, I think he had 6 catches for 92 yards and 2 touchdowns, which are his first 2 receiving touchdowns of the year.
That first touchdown catch he had was impressive, kind of sliding, seeing that ball out of the back of the end zone. Super nice catch to keep both feet or to get 1 foot in.
Yeah, absolutely. Bryce Peters, 4 catches, 108 yards, but never found the end zone. So we had to give it to somebody else this week. Drayton had a good game. And, there wasn't necessarily one player outside of maybe Drayton Lehman that stood out in this game. Sam McGath had 14 completions on 23 attempts for 263 yards and 2 touchdowns. But, spread the ball around quite a bit. You had 6 different players with at least 1 catch in this game. I'm counting it up right now. I believe 8 different players ran the ball, including backup quarterback Zach Romack and Uriah Glynn getting his first carries of the year, I believe. Running back who's a little bit buried on the depth chart right now. Antonio Brown got in and found the end zone again. This guy's an end zone magnet whenever he gets
all he does is score touchdowns, baby.
Absolutely. Connor Carver getting 3 carries for 17 yards in this game. And then it was more of the same. Jaden, Jarrett, and Justin, 8 carries, 6 carries, 6 carries, split the rock 3 ways. Jaden Washington looked really good in this game. He did have a long run of 30 yards, but 8 carries for 57 yards and a touchdown for Jaden Washington. So overall, just like you said, a really comfortable game. I don't have too many notes about like specific plays or anything in this game. I will say Bemidji's got to do a little bit better job at like ball security because this probably could have been like a 50-point game, but there was a couple of instances again where Bemidji fumbled. I believe they had a fumble inside the 20 or inside the 10.
They had one in the red zone for sure.
Yeah, that they lost the ball, and then Sam threw a couple of picks. But again, we're not too stressed out about interceptions on this channel. We kind of realize
minor critiques.
Yeah, you got to push the ball downfield to have success, and sometimes that comes with interceptions. But
yeah,
again,
when you
a good game overall. Go ahead.
When you look at this game for Bemidji State, I mean, in terms of total yards, just domination, 497 to 195. Passing yards was 301 to 128. rushing yards 196 to 67. Now, UMary was down early, so they had to throw a lot, which will skew that a little bit, but still, Bemidji State got him playing into the game exactly that they wanted to play. And even though UMary did win time of possession 31-40, that doesn't really matter in terms of this game because Bemidji State was ripping off big chunk plays if you watch. So their drives weren't long and sustained because, well, UMary couldn't tackle them. So they ended up getting 20-yard play, 30-yard play, touchdown. And that's just going to happen when you play a team like UMary. Bemidji State does go swimming in the lake. Not really much to talk about with this game, Ian. It's pretty straightforward when you look at everything. And now the focus is going back on the road to take on Northern. Before we preview that game, Ian, why don't we go around the NSIC?
Yeah, let's do it because it was an exciting week in the NSIC. Close game in St. Paul this week. Minnesota State 33, Concordia St. Paul 20. And that, I guess, is a little bit closer than I expected for a Concordia team who's never been super competitive in the conference. And Mankato, of course, in one poll, I believe they're ranked 4th. So it's
something like that.
Yeah, it's a pretty close game there from what I expected. Minnesota-Duluth did not leave so much up to chance. It was a 62-0 blowout of SMSU at home in Duluth. MSU Moorhead continues to be the most volatile yet explosive team in this conference. We talked about it a little bit last night with Jared and Lucas off the air. They have 52 rush attempts on the year, not including sacks. So they do not run the ball very much at all. But anyways, MSU Moorhead. They got another win. They are now 2-2, but their 2 wins have now come from Minnesota-Duluth and now Augustana. They beat Augustana 43-41. So they are a giant killer in this conference. That's going to be
their losses to on the season.
So they lost to Wayne pretty handily back in week 2. And then they lost a non-conference game to McKendree University. And I don't know how good McKendree is, but I know that they're not a ranked team in the top 25. So
right.
MSU Moorhead beats the ranked teams and loses to unranked teams. They are, like I said, a little bit volatile. And we'll give you a more in-depth breakdown in a few weeks. We do play them early November, I think it is. So
we'll look at that. Right.
We'll look at that more in the coming future. Minot State, a little surprisingly to me, 26-22 over the University of Sioux Falls. The triple option Beavers are a little bit exciting this year. I think they averaged 255 yards on the ground. We have them coming up even sooner than MSU Moorhead, but I mean, I guess good for Minot State. This will be probably one of the most interesting Beaver battles that we've ever had in football. Bemidji, of course, over UMary, and then Northern State beating Winona State, which shocked me a little bit because I thought Winona State was kind of a tier below the bottom of the NSIC, and Northern State was kind of in that bottom tier. But Northern State was at home, and they'll be at home again this week when the Beavers play them. That's the only action so far in the NSIC this week. Bemidji State starting to creep ahead of the pack. There's a lot of parity in this conference, and I wanted to give you a quick buy or sell, CJ, on this conference.
All right. Yeah, let's do it.
So, CJ, buy or sell, the parity in this conference is going to make it harder for Bemidji State to make the Division II playoffs.
I think no, because I think I'm selling that idea because I think if Bemidji State just takes care of business, it shouldn't matter because if they have wins over everybody and they have a good enough record, they'll creep in. Now, if they lose to like a Northern State, like they play on Saturday, then all of a sudden the parity really does start to matter. Or if they lose to an MSU Moorhead, let's say, then that stuff does start to matter. But, or Minot State, let's say that if they fall in the Beaver battle, like then the parity would get to them. But I think currently if they take care of business and even if they have one slip up along the way, let's say they can't quite finish off Augie on the last game of the season, or maybe they do fall to Wayne State or something like that. I think overall that should still save them if they take care of business in their other games. So I'm selling that idea. I think if Bemidji State just takes care of business, I don't think it'll matter.
Absolutely, yeah. And it does hinge a lot on Bemidji State being able to take care of business. But I look around the region that they're in, and there's a lot of tough teams inside the top 25. And there's, Augustana's now got 2 losses. Granted, one of them's to a Division 1 team. If Moorhead kind of keeps cannibalizing the best teams in the conference, those teams aren't going to be as good of a win when you get to them. And even Moorhead, they've got 2 losses already on the season. So how quality of a win is Moorhead going to be? So that does raise a little bit of concern if none of those teams in the central region, I believe is what the Beavers are in,
Yeah.
kind of slip up. That maybe this region's just too tough this year, but we might have to wait a little bit longer and just kind of see how it plays out. Right now, the Beavers both Beavers are actually tied at 4-1 overall, 3-1 in the NSIC for second place. Minnesota State is the only unbeaten team in the conference now after Augustana's loss to MSU Moorhead. There's like a four-way tie at 2-1 between Duluth, Wayne State, Augustana, and MSUM in the conference. A little bit of a log jam. But if we want to tab over to statistics and kind of start giving a breakdown of this Northern State game, even with the win that Northern State had this week over Winona, I don't know that I see this as too much of a problem game for Bemidji State. Northern State's scoring offense this year averages just 12.8 points, and Bemidji State up at 30 points per game.
Remember with this offense with Northern State, I don't mean to cut you off, Ian, but remember who the offensive coordinator is for Northern.
Yeah,
it's
Jordan Hine.
Jordan Hine, former Bemidji State quarterback, assistant coach, friend of the podcast. He's came on before, and it's just overall a good dude. He's the offensive coordinator there, and it's taken time because it takes a lot of time to implement. I don't know how different their system was a year ago to what Jordan's trying to put in there now, but it just takes a little bit of time trying to figure each other out. Jordan's grown into the position, and then you also have a team that's trying to grow into him and the offense he wants to run in the system, and trying to figure out kind of that happy medium, or to make the marriage work, I should say, trying to just go through those bumps in the road that every coordinator has. And yeah, their offense has just not quite gotten off the ground so much this season. It'll be fascinating to see how that plays now, because Jordan Hine is very familiar with this Bemidji State defense, and the Bemidji State defense is very familiar with the kind of tendencies and the things that he wants to do. So it'll be a fun chess match on that second level service, because you hear this all the time in the NFL, like, oh, X player played for X team last year. That means he has the advantage because he can tell the other team everything that he knows about them. But on the flip side, so does the team who the guy used to play for. They saw him in the building every day. They know exactly what kind of player he is. They know and so it'll be a fascinating back and forth. I think that's an extra wrinkle added on to this game. But just since you were talking about the offensive numbers, I think it's just important to remind everybody, hey, there's a former Beaver that's the offensive coordinator right now for Northern.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that is a big storyline to watch, especially from a Beaver Banter's perspective. He is one of our first ever football guests on the show. So very exciting to see what they can do, and how the gangrene defense can stifle his offense, which so far has not been one of the better ones in the conference. Like I said, just 12.8 points per game, Bemidji up at 30. Defensively, they're not much better. They give up 32.2 points per game. Bemidji State in second in the conference with 15 points per game given up on average. So pretty good totals there when you're looking at scoring. And then from a rushing perspective, Bemidji's still one of the top teams in the conference defensively and offensively. They sit in third in both categories, picking up almost 200 yards per game on the ground and giving up only 82 yards per game on the ground. Northern State's rush defense, not that bad compared to some of the other stats they have, only giving up about 140 yards on the ground. And then they average 140 yards per game offensively, and they give up about 175. So, yeah. Passing, they are not much of a passing team. Second bottom in the conference, only to Minot State. They've thrown the ball 101 times this year. This third least in the conference. Fourth least. Minnesota-Duluth is all the way up there. Their passing offense for Minnesota-Duluth is ranked second in the conference in yards per game, but they have the second least amount of pass attempts. Now, granted, that's because they've only played 4 games and some teams have played 5, but that's an impressive passing offense for Minnesota-Duluth. Yeah, but Northern State, just 102 yards per game through the air, and their defense, not bad. Fifth in the conference, they only allow 170 yards per game through the air. So I think that the matchup is there on paper. If you're just breaking it down by statistical category, Bemidji State does like to run the ball quite a bit. Seems like Northern State's rush defense is their weakness. And, you never know how that is. Northern's not been very good this year. So a lot of teams are probably running the ball on them quite a bit more in the second half. So that skews that a little bit, I'm sure.
Right. And looking at these scores, by the way, to kind of add to your point, I mean, they've had their point differential is a little kind of skewed because when you look at the first game of the season, they went to South Dakota, a top 5 team in the FCS in Vermilion, and they lost 45-3. Then they go to Sioux Falls to take on USF, and they lose 34, or they host Sioux Falls, and they lose 34-10. Then they go to Minot, lose 17-14, and then lose to Augustana 41-7 before beating Winona State 30-24. So their offense did put up a good performance against Winona over the weekend, and maybe that's kind of the thing where, or the game where things start to click, and that's again just a fascinating thing to kind of see over the course of the season for Northern.
Yeah, player to watch on offense, probably Hank Kraft. I'm assuming is that a running back or a quarterback? I wish it would say on the NSIC website here what position they played, but he's 7th in the conference in yards. He averages 4.5 yards per carry this season. So, yeah, he's probably going to be the guy to watch out for offensively. Like I said, their pass offense, not very threatening. So if you can shut
Kraft
down
is a running back, by the way.
Right. And I assume so just because I'm assuming
sometimes
they
those
don't
quarterback rushes can skew the stats a little bit.
Right. And with sacks and stuff in there, it's hard for a quarterback to be, unless they're, Wall Jasper from Minnesota-Duluth, I'm sure is pretty high up on this list. Sam McGath is 13th, actually, with 220 yards this season already. And then Daniel Britt, I don't know if that's a backup running back or if that's their quarterback, but he's 14th for
quarterback.
State. So that's their quarterback. So he's 14th. So pretty similar in terms of where they're ranked. Jaden Washington 4th in the conference, Hank Kraft 7th, and then the quarterbacks right next to each other for these two teams as well. So should be a quick game because I'm assuming there will be a lot of running the football, and those games can typically be over in 2 hours or less sometimes because the clock is just always moving.
Especially new rules in college football where they don't stop the clock every first down unless it's under 2 minutes and at the end of each half. So yeah, this game has a potential to let the clock tick a little bit. I think for Bemidji State overall, it's just taking care of business and doing the things they need to do. They've done such a good job, and I know they passed a lot on Saturday, but they do such a good job of being balanced. I think this year's team, not more than any other team of the last few years, but it really feels like it. And maybe it's just the fact of we're just seeing this team through a different lens now with McGath at quarterback. And we talked last week about how good of a job he's been doing, and really feels like this team hasn't missed a beat, even if the numbers don't quite look the same. But this offense is scoring, they're running, they're passing, they're doing the things they need to do. McGath as a runner has helped them. I was watching some of the highlights just before we started recording of the football team's win on Saturday, and there was that read option play on the end zone where McGath was able to just walk in. And a little bit later in the game, they do that exact same play in that exact same situation. And you can see they had to respect McGath's running ability, and that D end had to wait and had to be disciplined. He's like, okay, cool, I'll hand it off to Washington, and he can walk into the end zone. So I think overall, I think when we talk about Bemidji State having that resurgence in rushing, I think McGath's ability with his feet and as a runner, I think has added an extra level that is just another thing defenses have to prepare for. And Bemidji State's running backs have just done a good job of also running. The offensive line has been good. But overall, it's just been a unit that I think has been well balanced. And I think overall it helps the team be more balanced as well, because we know how good the Bemidji State defense is, and it's just overall help. So there's not a specific area I'm looking to target. If I'm Bemidji State, I think if they run their game and do the things they need to do, there's no reason they shouldn't come out with a win here.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is just one of those games where you just don't want to start too slow and play sloppy because like that's the difference between the UMary game and the SMSU game. And you look at the point differential in those games and it's like, well, we beat SMSU by 33 and we only beat UMary by 34. So what's the difference between those games? I think it just looked a little bit cleaner from the jump against UMary. It made you feel like the team really was in control of the game. Where against SMSU, the defense was holding SMSU
They
to
were
like
in
no
control, but it
yards.
didn't look like it if you looked at the scoreboard. Kind of a
Yeah,
vibe.
it was a. If you were watching the game, you could tell like SMSU's got nothing going offensively. But yeah, if you're just watching the scoreboard during the game, it didn't seem like Bemidji really had it in control. But I expect it to be another win. Northern has not been very impressive this year, and Bemidji State has. So I think that's my 2-second breakdown of the game.
You just
I
jinxed them.
would predict
Congratulations.
I would predict a Bemidji State win, even on the road this season. They are not that bad.
I think Bemidji State wins this game 31-17. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it'll be. I got to give the defense a little bit of credit. I think they're going to hold Northern State to, I'll say 10 points, and I think that it's going to be 35-10. Yeah.
All right, perfect. Let's roll into some other sports. Women's soccer only played one game over the weekend, but it was a victory. And, we talk about how good the Bemidji State women's soccer defense is all the time, but masterclass by that defense, goalkeeping all the way around for their performance on Saturday, or over the weekend, I should say, against a USF team that was looking for their first win. Even though, again, on the scoreboard, it's 1-0 Bemidji State. Ian, just looking at the stats post game, what a performance on defense! Just kind of choked the life out of USF.
Absolutely, they had 3 shots total. One of those making it through the goaltender. The goal in this game came by Madison.
One
Fertel.
shot on goal.
Yeah, one shot on goal. That's just stifling defense. And USF not been very talented this year offensively either. I believe they have just 3 goals on the season through 7 games that they've played. They're 0-7. But yeah, Bemidji just did what they do. They played a really good defensive game, and they took the opportunity when it came to them. 15 shots for BSU, 8 on target. The goal by Madison Fertel and the assist by Sydney Sutherland. So, yeah, a good game overall. If you look at the standings, again, we're still early in the season. Bemidji is one of just a few teams that have actually played only 3 games so far in the conference. Because of the fact that the teams in the conference are only 15 now. Somebody's got to sit out an extra game every week. And this week it was Bemidji State. So, Bemidji's currently sitting down in like 7th place. Yep, 7th place. I'm, again, begging the NSIC to just put a number next to it so I don't have to count down the columns every time on the podcast when I'm trying to look at where they're at. But they sit in 7th with 6 points. But, again, everybody ahead of them has played 4 games so far. So for Bemidji, I expect them to be competing again for home field in the playoffs. Again, they lost to St. Cloud State, but St. Cloud's a pretty good team this year. They're going to have another crack at them, I'm sure, at some point this year. And as we know, we can beat them in a tournament format. We just maybe can't beat them lately in the regular season. So that's totally fine with me.
We beat them when it matters.
Yep. Coming up this next weekend, we have Parents Weekend and Senior Day. We play Winona State and Southwest Minnesota State. Just looking at the standings, these are 2 teams at the bottom. Southwest has yet to win a game this year. They are 0-6-1, so they do have a tie. Winona State 2-3-1. And both teams currently sit in the bottom 4 in the conference. If you want to look at goal margin, which is a combination of how many goals you score and how many goals you've given up on the season, Bemidji State sits in 4th in the conference with a goal margin of 0.85. And you go all the way down to Winona State at 10th with a negative 0.84 goal difference margin. And 15th place in the conference, Southwest Minnesota State with a -2. That is the worst in the conference. So let's not count our chickens before they hatch, CJ. But again, I kind of expect a sweep this weekend, especially at home at the Chet. for the Beavers and picking up a huge 6 points to kind of rocket them back upwards into that top 4, I would assume, if they get 6 points this weekend.
Football team's not in town, so the chat is wide open for you to go and watch. If you're a student, if you're in the community, go watch this women's soccer team. Once again, trying to have another great season. I know the record-wise doesn't indicate it right now, 4-3, but once we get through the meat and potatoes of the NSIC schedule, I mean, this is a good soccer team as it always is. Go watch them. It's going to be a weekend where they hopefully are going to beat up on a couple bad teams. Might not look like it in the score column as we saw from last week's game, but like, watch the whole game and you'll see that they just don't let the other team get the ball or keep it for very long if they do get it. So it's a weekend where they should sweep. And I think, as you talk about in other sports, like it's always tough to predict a sweep just because there's so many things that can happen and you play 2 games and the randomness, and especially with the defensive style that Bemidji State does like to play, it just kind of can leave the door open sometimes, but they should sweep this weekend, I think. So that's where we're looking at for women's soccer. Let's flip the page and let's talk a little BSU volleyball, and then we'll wrap it up with women's hockey.
Volleyball had 2 games over the weekend, both against ranked opponents, number 15 in the country, Minnesota-Duluth, and they were in this game, man. They took it to 5 sets.
That was an emotional game, man.
Yeah.
For a lot of different reasons.
It was.
They got down 2-0 and then took it to 5. Yeah,
they did. They almost reverse swept Minnesota-Duluth, and they had a little bit of a run towards the end of set 5, but they still ended up dropping that one 15-11. But yeah, I mean, that's a very good game from Bemidji State to kind of show you that this team is still here, especially in NSIC play. They're not just going to roll over and give up and get swept so many times.
And that was a good Bulldogs
2
team.
days later. Yeah, again, top 15 team in the country. 2 days later, you get St. Cloud State, who is probably a little angry about last year, and they did sweep you on your home court. But, hey, that's a top 12 team in the country. So, not the weekend you'd want, but I think it's maybe not something we came in not expecting, playing 2 top 15 teams in the country. So right. Starting your NSI season off 0-2, that's unfortunate, but got to keep climbing. We didn't expect this team to be fighting for the NSIC title this year. I think we're just hoping that maybe some way they can be there at the end of the season looking for a postseason berth as that 7 or 8 seed.
Right. Looking for an NSIC tournament berth. If they can sneak in as one of those final 2 spots, I think that's something that this program will be very happy for, especially again, considering the circumstances with this team, with their head coach passing away and right before the season and having those games kind of get pushed away in your first game of the season against a ranked Minnesota-Duluth team, you get down 2-0. And just there's a lot of, I don't think anybody would fault the team for coming off, not flat, but just, and this isn't a slight, but for coming off just a little unfocused or like tough to kind of lock in that situation. And they got down 2-0. I think if they would have got swept, I don't think anybody would have blamed them. And they rally back. And like you said, they made it close in that 5th set. And it's tough with the 5th set because those things are sprints, not marathons. And any team going on like a 4-0 run is just a dagger in those 5th sets. And Bemidji State just couldn't quite pull off the upset. But I think it's always cheesy to say a little bit, but it's true. I mean, the heart of the team to not give up and to make it tough and to make it a good game and to throw a couple punches UMD's way is, even though they didn't win the game, that's just a gutsy performance and they should be credited with playing their hearts out that night, all things considered. So an impressive game for them. And then you come out on Saturday and the emotions are a little drained. It's homecoming. You just had that performance on Thursday night. And, that was what it was, losing to St. Cloud State. But the good news is they're home again this weekend, Ian, and they have Augustana, a team that's always tough. And then you have Wayne State College, who's ranked number 6 in the country. As we've talked about all season long and last year, the NSIC is the top volleyball conference in Division II, and every week is a gauntlet, and they got another one this weekend.
Yeah. Yeah, Wayne State's going to be really tough. Again, you're just hoping that you can see some improvement. I don't know that we took a set off of Wayne State last year. Let's see if we can take a set. Or, I'm not saying that they can't win the game. I'm saying it's not expected from me that they're going to win that game.
If
But
they don't win the game, we're not going to be like, what was going
what
on
was
there?
going on? How
Yeah.
could we possibly lose this? But Augustana, I think that is a team that you want to try to play a competitive game with and beat if you are really going to have any chance towards the end of the season at kind of making that playoff push, because we don't have a ton of gimme games last season. This season, like we did last season with Minot State and UMary on the schedule twice a piece last year. Crookston was on the schedule once or twice last year. Those are kind of gimme games for a Bemidji State team, at least last year, and not in years prior. But these are the type of games against Augustana that the team is going to have to rally and find a way to win if they truly do want to make a run at that 8th seed this year.
Yeah, exactly. They're gonna need to win, and they're gonna need to find some ways to do it. They're gonna need to pull off a couple upsets here and there, and it'll be fascinating to see if they can do it this weekend. It's at the BSU Gymnasium. Again, like women's soccer, like volleyball, basically like football, any sport other than hockey. If you're a BSU student, you get in for free. So just walk in and go watch some volleyball and some women's soccer over the weekend. The football team is away, so not a bad time to go support the ladies as well this weekend. Let's wrap things up with women's hockey. They had Saturday's game against Ohio State televised on Fox 9 Plus. I haven't recorded. I skimmed a little bit of it. Haven't had time to sit down and watch it. There was a bunch of stuff going on Saturday that I wasn't able to watch it live, but super cool that Bemidji State women's hockey was able to get featured on, even though it's local TV, it's still TV and something that is just hugely accessible to many people, which was awesome. And it was the better game that they played over the weekend as well. I believe it was that second game. So where they lost 3-0 to Ohio State, the first game of the season, Ian, a little more lopsided, but overall, what was kind of your initial impressions from the Frickland era of BSU women's hockey, even though they started out 0-2?
Well, I'm impressed if you take away the first period of Friday night's game, because we chatted a little bit again off air with Lucas about this yesterday, and they scored 5 goals in the first period. Bemidji State tied them in the second, or I'm sorry, no, they lost 3-2 in the second and third periods of that game. But that's a good result against an Ohio State team for this Bemidji State team coming off
defending national champs, 5th in the country.
Exactly. And then only a 3-0 loss on Saturday, where I think that you played particularly well and just didn't take your chances offensively. That maybe if you do, that swings the tide of the game a little bit, but they couldn't get any goal scoring help. And that's just what happens. You're going to lose some games like that. But Haley Armstrong with a goal, shorthanded on Friday, and Issa Godel, who I believe is an incoming freshman, scoring her first goal as a Beaver. So yeah, that was Friday night. Saturday they got shut out, but if we want to bring up our women's Beaver Banter Player of the Week, that would be Caitlin Gross, who came into a pretty impossible situation. I believe that she was basically just on the roster because they were nervous. They weren't going to have
added in like September.
Goalie. Yeah, they weren't going to have a backup goalie, I think is what it was, for the start of the season. And she gets thrown in there for game 2, and she made 52 saves on 55 shots. So again, reigning national champions. Maybe Ohio State's a little bit overrated this year. I think that, maybe they're not off to the best start, but again, that's still a pretty impressive game, making 52 saves. And, like I said, if she gets some offensive help earlier in that game, maybe this game turns a little bit more in Bemidji State's favor. But yeah, not a bad weekend at all. All things considered,
right.
I'm excited to see what this team can do going forward this season. I wouldn't expect too much in the beginning half of the season, but come November and into next year, I would like to see, in the next calendar year, not next hockey season, but as this team plays together more and gets their skates underneath them better, I want to see what this team can really do, coming down the home stretch of this season. But
Well,
this next weekend, a couple games.
there's a couple winnable
against
games here this weekend.
Robert Morris.
And that's who they got a win against the season ago, I believe, when they went out that direction, out to Pennsylvania. I believe it was in Pittsburgh. They ended up playing them a year ago. And it's cool that they have an opportunity second weekend to see that they can not just get some moral victories here, but get some actual victories, because this should be some winnable games for them over the weekend.
Yep, they beat Robert Morris 3-1 last season. That was, again, in Pittsburgh. This one is in Moon Township, Pennsylvania. But again, winnable games. Let's see if this era can get off to the right start. I'm not going to fault them too much about getting swept against the reigning national champions in their first weekend of the year, but this is where we want to start seeing some results, and this could be a huge, huge weekend for the beginning of the Amber Frickland era.
Right, exactly. And it's going to be huge, because if you can even just split over the weekend to get that first win of the season, get the first win of her head coaching tenure at Bemidji State out of the way, you do have St. Cloud State at home, and then you have Lindenwood in a non-conference matchup, and then it's at Wisconsin versus the Gophers. Then you have a couple matchups with the Tommies about a month from now, and then you go to UMD, you go to Mankato. I mean, and that's kind of what it is for the rest of the calendar year. But there's some, as we talked about, the WCHA is a tough conference, and it's like a two-class conference when you have Minnesota, Wisconsin, Ohio State at the top. And even though Ohio State is down and they're not projected to be as good as they were a season ago, and to take not a massive step back, but a considerable step back, considering they won the national title last year. But overall, I think that this is still a tough Ohio State team, and there's always going to be a talent disparity, just considering they're Ohio State and their resources are just a little bit deeper for women's hockey. So for Bemidji State,
you would think, right? But we talked about it again last night off air. We had a extensive conversation with Jared.
Had a great conversation. Yeah, we should have almost recorded that one.
Recorded the whole thing. But Ohio State's only got 10 forwards on the roster.
Mm-hmm.
And for hockey, people that aren't super big into hockey, which if you're listening to this podcast, you probably are, but you skate 12 forwards like on any given night. So the fact they only have 10 on their roster and they're the reigning national champs, like where
all the money went to football, I guess. Do you see the NIL players they brought in for football? That's where all the money went.
Yeah. I mean, that's a shock to me. And I wonder how much that's going to have an effect on this team. Not that we're an Ohio State podcast, but it'll be interesting to see towards the end of the season. Injuries are going to happen. Like, it's a physical sport, and
right,
not as much.
It's
on the
a long season, anyways. But it's just a long
season, and 10 forwards all year. Like, that's going to be tough. That's going to be really, really tough for Ohio State. I don't know that I would predict them right now to win this conference if I was a media member.
All right, let's wrap up. I know we did a full men's hockey preview, and if you haven't listened to that already, please go listen to that. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Also YouTube. You can go check out that full podcast there as well. If you want to see me, Ian, Lucas, and Jared's beautiful faces to start your day, that is something that you could very much do on YouTube. Let's just a quick men's hockey kind of brief expectations for the weekend. It's a little interesting because they do have hockey this weekend. The season is back. And we talk about all kind of the preseason stuff, everything going on, but it's just weirdy in that it's one game, right? Usually it's a home and home when you're playing a team like Minnesota-Duluth, and they're going on the road to Amsoil Arena on Saturday, 5:07 puck drop. Duluth, the 18th team in the country. And it surprises me a little bit that Duluth is ranked. I know they had a good recruiting class coming in, but considering the year they had a season ago, is a little fascinating that they think that highly of Coach Sandelin's crew. But still, Bemidji State, it's always a winnable game when you have these in-state rivalries. I think there's no reason Bemidji State can't go compete with UMD and go 1-0 in their first weekend of play. Yeah.
Duluth is, in my opinion, absurdly overrated, especially coming off the season that they did. But that's just the NCHC tax. They're kind of like the SEC for me, where, the reason that this conference looks so good every year is because you ranked 11 of 14 SEC teams preseason. No wonder they all look good because every loss is coming against a ranked team. But who decides the rankings? Oh, that would be the media before the season starts. Like, that's just kind of like, oh, everybody's like, oh, the NCHC has 8 teams ranked in the top 20 this year, or top maybe it's only 7 ranked in the top 20, but it's like, yeah, but like they haven't done anything yet, and now they just like get the benefit of the doubt the whole season. So it is a good hockey conference. I'm not going to doubt them completely 100%, but I do think this is a very winnable game, and something that was kind of brought up last night in our recap with Jared and Lucas was the fact that they're coming in and they've got such a huge freshman class coming in. There's a lot of new faces for that team.
A lot of pieces
Duluth.
they still need to kind of smooth over and figure out who fits where.
And I think you're getting them at a good time of the season, at least to play them in Duluth. Last year, I think the games go a lot differently if we see them at the end of the year rather than the beginning of the year. Bemidji State was hot at the end of the year. Duluth kind of only had a good stretch there at the beginning of the year. So we just kind of met them at the wrong time last year. And with Bemidji having so much talent coming back this next season, I wonder if that's going to be a benefit to them in this game. And if they can get off to a good start, maybe steal a goal or two in the first period, I think that with the defensive prowess that Bemidji State's going to carry this year, at least I would think so, with a couple of really good, solid defenders coming back. Matthias Scholl is going to be one of the best goaltenders in the CCHA again this year. I wonder if they can't steal a game here off Duluth. Of course, it's just one game. They'll finish this series on New Year's Eve in Bemidji. That's the strangest thing ever, having a split series over the course of 3 months, basically. But yeah, just one game this weekend. It's going to be in Amsoil, so
always a tough place to play. Always a house of horrors for Bemidji State hockey, it feels like. And you know what? As somebody who used to live in Duluth for a couple of years, you know what, Bemidji State, if you want to go in there and blow the doors off of them, hey, that's fine by me.
Yeah, just absolutely. Awesome to start off the season with a win when last season you won one game out of conference, if you're not counting the Augustana games, which are
right.
And that
kind of conference, kind of not like, yeah. So their one win was an overtime victory against Army.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Despite taking Wisconsin to overtime the night before, that was such a fascinating first weekend of the season for Bemidji State.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Go listen to the full hockey recap preview on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. The Beaver Banter YouTube page, always a good place to check out our content. Until next time, I'm CJ Baumgartner. That's Ian Rivers.